the thing that really kind of blows my mind about the cards, and I want to continue with the story, but I also want to kind of veer off and get your understanding of like the origin of the cards. Like when I think about the power of these cards, like I was just telling Gabriella today, I was like, do you understand how powerful these cards are? Like these cards have built cities. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, Las Vegas? Like that there would be no Las Vegas if there was no deck of cards. It doesn't matter, like, yeah, the slot machines and the craps table and all that, but really it's all about the
That's right.
cards. And so like these cards have literally built civilizations. They built
Yes,
cities.
that's what they're for.
And
We built
yeah.
an entire city on the fake meaning of the cards. This is
Yes,
what I feel, and
exactly.
I have like shivers as I say
Yes.
this, that I
Yes.
believe that these cards are to build the civilization on our planet. And I
Mm,
believe they were given to us a long, long time ago by an advanced race of beings for that purpose, to help us build civilization on this planet. And I thank you for segueing that in, because I sometimes am hesitant to say that, because I mean no disrespect to other esoteric systems. If people
mhm,
love their human design or their tarot cards, astrology, of course, and
mhm,
yet these cards are the foundation of all of it, because
mm,
they show the way that our reality is constructed. Our reality, so quantum physics, studying string theory, finding whatever it is now, 11, 12 different vibrating strings. My theory is that as quantum physicists dive deeper into the quantum field, they're going to find that there are 13 vibrating strings across 4 quadrants of being, and that
mm,
some very advanced civilization has been able to map the vibrating frequencies that make up our space-time matrix and put it in a simple conceptual frame of reference, so that we can understand the sea of energy inside of which we are and have a conceptual symbolic reference point for our human experience. And then from that foundation, we can much more clearly map the stars and all the other aspects of our being. And the tarot cards, the archetypal stories of human nature, then layer on top perfectly on top of these building blocks that are really just building blocks. And then from
mm.
there, we create our stories, and then we can navigate more clearly by the stars once we have this basic foundation. And that's the really interesting part about it. You hit the nail on the head that these cards have built cities, and
Yeah,
that's what they're for. They're
yeah,
to build civilization with. That's And when we restore the right meaning of them, the true meaning of them, that's when I think we can build an enlightened civilization on this planet.
welcome to the weekly transit. Interviews and conversations from an astrological lens. There's nothing more fascinating to me about this earth than the people who inhabit it. My mission is to create deep, vulnerable, and open conversations that invite our unique guests to share the arc of their ever-evolving journey through life, in the hope that their stories inspire and resonate with you, our listeners. I'm your host, Scott Tajarian. Welcome to the weekly transit. I am here with my guest, Alexander. How do I say your last name? Is it Dunlop?
Dunlop, yeah, Alexander Dunlop.
Dunlop. Okay. Alexander Dunlop. Awesome. Awesome. Alexander is an amazing individual that wrote this book called Play Your Cards Right, a Sacred Guide to Life on Earth. This book is fascinating. I actually got introduced to this book by my partner, Gabriella. I saw this on her shelf, or she might have shown it to me. And I remember going through and reading what my card is. It really just blew my
Mm.
mind. Like this was years ago, but I just reread it again, and I want to reread for all the listeners before we get going into Alexander, because I cannot recommend this book enough.
Mm.
Like I always talk about how, it's my goal to help you understand who you are so you can accept, appreciate, and love the divine, unique miracle that is you.
Mm.
And this book by Alexander, Play Your Cards Right, is gives such a specific insight into who you are. If I just read my card, which I'm the 7 of clubs, and so in example expressions, and I love how you wrote this, Alexander, because you you start off with it feels good, and then we get into like the
Sure.
the really nitty gritty parts, and then it ends on a high note. So I'm going to totally expose myself right now because when I read this, I was like, wow, this is me. And you totally seduced me with like the first couple descriptors where you're like, genius insights, big picture thinking, rhetoric skill, a quick study. And then it starts to descend here. Jumping to conclusions, negative thinking, assuming the worst, critical or cynical criticism, biting sarcasm, mental instability, crippling self doubt, dark mood swings, spiritual curiosity, metaphysical connections, innovative thought leadership, profound wisdom. I was like, wow, that is me, the good, the bad, the ugly. If I'm being totally honest with myself and the audience, like these are all descriptors that I feel sometimes like on a daily basis. And um, so I'm really excited to talk to you about this book, Alexander. Alexander, his primal triad, he's been gracious enough to share his astrological code with me, and his moon is in the sign of grace, which is Libra. The sun is in Virgo, and the ascendant is in Capricorn. So thank you very much, Alexander. Welcome to the weekly transit.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Awesome. So tell me, you get into this in the book, but I just, for the listeners that haven't read the book, I hope they go out and get it. But tell us about your story. First of all, I don't think you get into this in the book, but I wanted to ask you, you were born in
I
London.
was born, yeah.
So yeah, what's the story there?
Ooh, what's the story there? So, my father's Scottish, and my mother's American, kind of Irish mutt from the Long Island area. And as the
Hmm.
story goes, they met in France. They were hitchhiking through France together, and then they settled in London. And he was already a
Wow.
British citizen, and
Uh huh.
they were there for 13 years. I was born there. My sister was born there. They got divorced, so the sweetheart romantic story ended there. And my
Mm.
mother took my sister and I, moved us to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to move in with her mother, who had retired from the New York area down to Fort Lauderdale. So I moved from London to Fort Lauderdale when I was just turning 8 years old.
Oh wow. What was that experience like for
Terrible,
you? That must have been crazy.
terrible.
Yeah. Wow.
Um, yeah, it was an extreme, like you would see kind
Mm.
of in a movie scenario, where I
Mm.
went from being chauffeur driven in a Rolls Royce, wearing a tie and blazer, to the best private school in London, where I was addressed as Master Dunlop, to moving into what seemed to me like a roach shack with flying
Wow.
cockroaches. And yeah, in
Really?
a crappy neighborhood, probably my grandmother had been sold a bill of goods. I come to this beautiful Fort Lauderdale neighborhood. It really wasn't. And there's insects that live in South Florida, and it traumatized me on so many levels, and not least of which because of the emotional dislocation that was primarily the challenge. And fast forward many years later, one of the reasons it was so immensely helpful to find out that I'm born to play the Nine of Hearts. So the Nine of Hearts is my birth card based on the mathematics,
Yes.
and made perfect sense for my life story of these tragic emotional dislocations in my journey. And that was just the first of many, where suddenly, like, kind of the rug is pulled out from under me, and my emotional relationships are suddenly shifted. Because at that time, I had no explanation. When we went to Fort Lauderdale, my mother didn't tell us we were staying. We were going to visit Granny for the summer. And then at the end of the summer, it was, well, we're staying. You're not going back to England.
Oh
And that
my
was it.
god.
That was the only explanation we got.
Wow.
So it was emotionally
Wow.
traumatizing.
Oh my god. Yeah, for sure. That's it was almost like you was it like it felt like you were kidnapped in a sense by
No,
your mother and
that's
taken away,
that
or
would be too
is that too
that would be too
extreme?
extreme. It was, we're
Yeah.
going on holiday to see Granny, and I think what happened, as I put pieces together later on, is while we were there, she discovered that not only was my dad having an affair, but the other woman had actually had a baby. And I think she didn't figure that out until after we were already gone. And then she's like, right, that's it. We're not going back. So I don't know if we
So
went originally with the intention of staying, because I
yeah.
remember we didn't have a lot of clothes with us. And, you know, I think she made the spontaneous decision. We're just staying. But
Were you able to get some closure with your father though? I mean, because like you say goodbye, hey, we're gone for the summer, and then
it was traumatizing. I mean, it's been a
yeah.
long story and a large part of my own journey, which
Mm,
it would be given that I'm born to play the Nine of Hearts. You read off the descriptors of your Seven of Clubs pathway, and it is accurate.
mm,
I've studied all the different things I could study over the years, which we can get into. And
yeah.
finding out my cards to play was the simplest and most accurate explanation of my life path, my life story, the theme of my soul's exploration in this lifetime. And the Nine of Hearts. The nine is about endings, and
Mhm.
hearts, emotions. So the Nine of
Yes.
Hearts life path is about emotional endings and then forgiveness and transcendence. And that's been the story of my life. So it helped me to make
That's
sense of
so
my life when I
interesting.
found out I'm born to play the Nine of Hearts.
Okay, wow. So I want to get into how the cards work in a second. I just want to continue with your story because it's fascinating. I also want to just reflect from an astrological perspective. You know, you were born with Saturn, which is the father and the planet of restriction, in Cancer, which is the sign of emotions, and that you were born with Saturn squaring Pluto. Pluto is the god of death, the planet of transformation. So when you talk about the nine of hearts, the ending of emotions, the Pluto energy, it kind of has that nine frequency because it represents endings and beginnings, and it's squaring Saturn, which is the father, but it's in Cancer, which is the sign of emotions.
And the
So
home.
that would indicate the home, exactly. That's it. Yes.
And I have a feeling you and I are going to have a lot of fun. We're going to have more than one conversation because I'm going to just drop a little nugget for you right now.
Yeah.
In our
Tell me.
life path, which you can see in my book, the ninth card in the
Mhm.
life path is your Pluto card.
Okay.
So whatever
Yes.
is your Pluto card, it has that Plutonian energy for you of the number nine. So there's that
Yes.
correlation.
Wow. Wow. I love it. I love, it's so many people that I do readings for will say, like, I had a reading with a psychic or a numerology person or a tarot reader, any sort of esoteric art. They're like, and they told me the exact same
Right.
thing. And I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
well, we should all be telling you the
Right.
same thing. It's just a different way of
That's right.
communicating what's going on in the
Mm,
ether.
that's
So
right.
whether it's these cards or the astrology or whatever it may be. So I love the correlation between the two.
Yeah.
So you were in Florida, 8 years old, till when?
Till college, and I couldn't wait to
Okay.
get out of Dodge. And
Oh, wow.
Fort Lauderdale is a nice place to visit. It really is. It's gotten a lot nicer since I've left. It's really upscale now.
Hmm.
If you were to go, my kind of heritage is Scottish Irish. My father's Scottish. My mother's kind of Irish mutt. Fort Lauderdale,
Hmm.
man, is it hot. It's
Yeah.
95 degrees, and 95% humidity for months out of the
Yeah.
year. And I would just walk outside and I'd be a bucket of sweat and quite miserable. And I have very pale skin, so I would burn very
Yes.
easily. So, for many reasons, I couldn't wait to get out and came north for college. And now I'm settled in New York.
Wow. Very different from London, the climate in Fort
Yes,
Lauderdale.
very different.
Shockingly
It
so.
was, yeah, like I said, it's a nice place to visit.
So you went to college, you went to
Mhm.
Harvard. And what were you studying there?
So A little bit of a kind of a segue into that question is that when I was 17, as a senior in my Roman Catholic high school, the school sponsored retreats for the seniors.
Mm,
And it was on that retreat that I had a surprising spiritual awakening.
mm.
And that led me to be very interested in philosophy and psychology in college. So that's what I studied. I was looking for the answers, the big answers, and the meaning of life and the meaning of human beings. So that was what I studied.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you were born with the moon, Venus, and Uranus all in the ninth house, which is the house of philosophy. So you had an emotional connection to seeing the big picture, and connecting to the higher power. With Venus, a real love for understanding philosophy, and that sensory sort of expression of what it means to see things, the difference between right or wrong. And then Uranus there gives you that sense of independence in terms of your philosophical views. So interesting that you were taking that sort of maybe conventional route to do seminary, but you ended up uh, finding your own way off that
Well, I
path.
did. And I used to joke with people that I'm a priest in the world with no religion.
Yes. I love that. I get the same thing. Like a lot of times on my podcast, people are like, I feel like I'm listening to a sermon on Sunday or something when you're talking there. And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. Because I grew up in a church too. I was not Catholic, but Protestant. And, it was a fantasy of mine to be a pastor one day. So I really could relate to your story a lot in the book. But then after college, you ended up working in finance.
Well, I did with a detour into seminary first.
Seminary.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what happened in seminary where you're like, "Okay,
Yeah,
this
that's
isn't
a
the
good
right fit."
question. So, another kind of piece of the story is that I had that spiritual awakening that I mentioned. And then
When you were
when I was
17.
17, and then right after my, let me get my timeline right, after my freshman year at Harvard, I went on a different retreat and had like a full kind of like revival like experience where I accepted Jesus as my savior and
Mm,
slain in the spirit, speaking in tongues. And so I went deep into the evangelical Christianity, and I was a student minister on campus for InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. So more in the, not even, I mean, it's Protestant, but evangelical
mm,
Christianity. And so I say that because part of the reason why I went to Roman Catholic seminary was that after college, I found that Christianity was a lens too small for me. I couldn't, with a straight face, look my gay friends in the eye and tell them they were going to
mm,
hell. And I couldn't look my
right.
Buddhist roommate, who had been my roommate all 4 years, in the eyes and tell him he was going to hell if he didn't believe in Jesus. I couldn't do it. It didn't sit right with me. So I had a
Yes.
crisis of faith, and I kind of was shaken in my evangelical faith anyway. And I wanted to piece together what I really believed. And that was actually the reason why I went to seminary at that point. I had already, it's kind of a complicated, convoluted tale because I had already
I
gone to
love it,
live
yeah.
with priests in a poor barrio in Los Angeles. And I went there thinking I was going to become a priest. And after living and work,
Where in Los
I couldn't
Angeles? Do you
remember the
remember?
neighborhood. It was a
Okay,
Mexican
yeah,
neighborhood.
okay, yeah.
Um, I mean, I liked the priests. They were lovely
Uh-huh.
guys, but I realized it was not for me. So when I tell my story kind of in public, I was like, yeah, I went to seminary to see if I wanted to be a priest, to try to get the bio into a manageable portion to tell my story. But the truth is, I had already decided I didn't want to become a priest. And I actually went to seminary to piece together my faith again because I had lost my evangelical faith anyway, and I wanted to kind of figure out what I really believed still. So that's why I went to seminary, and I thought I would go on actually in academia. I thought it would be a stepping stone to go for like a philosophy of religion degree. That's what I was intending to do, was do the 2 years in seminary. And I wanted to go to a Catholic seminary specifically because I wanted to study my own upbringing, my faith of my upbringing. but it was affiliated with Harvard University. And so I was able to cross register. I took about half of my seminary courses at the Harvard Div School and the Harvard Graduate School. So I was studying Eastern religions as well as the Catholic religion. And I thought I wanted to get a PhD in religion. That's what I thought. And then after 2 years of doing that, I realized I didn't want this path anymore. Being a graduate student is kind of a lonely path. You're basically reading books for 8 to 10 hours a day. And you're sitting, it's not like being in an undergrad where you're socializing and people are getting together and hanging out. No, when you're a graduate
Mm.
student, you're locked in on, I'm reading these books. And I'm like, yeah, do I really want to read books like this for the rest of my life? No, I got enough. I've learned what I wanted to learn. And actually, I said to myself, you know what I want to do? It's time to make some money, for crying out loud.
Mm.
So let me go leverage, luckily, leverage my Harvard diploma as an undergrad. And this was in 1999, before the dot-com bubble burst, for those
Hmm.
going all the way back. And companies back then were hiring anyone, even if you didn't have any tech experience, and then they would train you. So I got hired by um, an IT consulting firm, and even though I had no computer background, and they hired a bunch of us, and they sent us for 8 weeks of training to train us in the computer languages and technologies that we needed. And then I was staffed in the financial services industry, working at Morgan Stanley. And then shortly after, about a year and a half into that, the firm was bought, and I rolled over into the new firm, and then I was a director of marketing and sales in the new firm. I got promoted very quickly. I did really well, even though
Wow.
I had no
Yeah.
prior background in computers or consulting or business. I did really well. I was promoted 3 times in 3 years, and then I was up to director of sales. And that's when the dot-com bubble burst in 2002. And through several rounds of layoffs, we were all eventually laid off. And I took my severance and my savings, and I bought a one-way ticket to India. My ex-girlfriend was
Okay.
there, so yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I want to get into all that. So I just want to reflect for a minute. It's like it's interesting. Your North Node, your soul's purpose is in Capricorn, which is the sign that represents
Yeah.
achievement, goals, ambitions, and your Mars is in Taurus, the sign that rules money, and your Mars is aligning exactly with your North Node in Capricorn. So that could indicate that when you are focused on goals and ambitions and really thinking about your values and what's important to you in a monetary sense, like you can achieve a lot. So it seems like that first job coming out of seminary, you're working in finance and you have no experience. And next thing you know, in 3 years, you're the director of sales at Morgan Stanley, or where were you
At the
then?
firm that,
The firm that represented
yeah.
or that
So I was at a
worked with Morgan
consulting
Stanley?
firm that got
Consulting
bought,
firm.
and then
Mhm,
we got rolled into a larger firm. And I transitioned. First, I was a business manager, then a director of
mhm.
marketing, and then a director of sales.
Okay. Wow. So and then you lost your job in the dot-com bubble burst,
Do you
uh,
remember those days?
and oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
totally, yeah,
I don't know how old you are.
I'm 3 years younger than
Uh,
you, so or 2 years younger. I was born in
okay,
1975, so I'm just a couple years behind
gotcha.
you, and, yeah, I wasn't working in that realm in '02. I was working in
Mm,
publicity. So I was working in like publicity in
mm,
Hollywood and doing all that sort of stuff. And it was in '04, April of '04, that I quit my job because I decided I wanted to like focus on writing and being a screenwriter. So that was a big like leap of faith for me, that where I landed kind of on my
mm.
face, and it was really hard to come back out of that uh, until I found astrology, which was that was 9 years ago now, almost 9 years ago. So it's hard to believe it's been that long, and that totally changed my life. But you went to bought a one-way ticket to India. You followed your ex-girlfriend. She was your girlfriend at the time, or an
No, she was an
ex-girlfriend?
ex. That's another
Mm.
convoluted story. I'm glad that she invited me. It got me to India, which I wanted to go
Oh
to India
wow.
anyway. I'd heard about this guy named Osho,
Oh
and
yeah. Have you seen Wild Wild Country? Have you
I
seen
saw
that
part of it.
documentary?
Yeah, I had already heard
Okay.
about that when I was staying because
Yeah.
I went and I ended up staying at his ashram in Pune, in India.
Yeah. But he wasn't there at the
No,
time though, was he?
he's already passed.
He was he'd already
Yeah,
passed away. Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Okay.
but
But you went to his
yep.
ashram.
So she got me to visit, to come to India,
Yeah.
and the kind of the theory was we hadn't worked out in New York, but the thought was, well, maybe be different in India, and it wasn't. It was the same.
Mm, mm,
But it got me to
mhm.
India, and it helped me, along my journey to get to stay at the Osho Center in Pune, which was a total life changing experience for me.
How so?
The biggest thing about it was, so I was in my Saturn returns at this time,
Yeah.
um, which you may be able to tell me more about what that means.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah,
was right
totally.
smack in my Saturn returns. I didn't know about astrology at the time, only afterwards, and
Mhm.
like, oh, that makes sense. The biggest single thing, well, there were two big things that happened. One is that I realized that I need to own my name. I had always gone by
Mm,
Alex, and I'd
mm,
always been consciously ashamed of the long name and the many syllables. And
mm,
people would be like, "Oh, Alexander the Great," and it was kind of
mm,
always had that connotation. It's got four syllables. It's a big,
mhm,
grandiose name. But as I was sitting there in meditation, and I was meditating up to 8 hours a day, doing the various meditations that he offered, it occurred to me that I was shortening myself. I was shrinking myself.
mm.
And it was something that we do culturally as well. And the funny way it came to me was that there are no Archangel Mikes or Archangel Gabes. It's Michael, it's Gabriel.
Mhm.
And there's a totally
Yes.
different vibrational frequency to the name Michael versus Mike, or Gabriel versus Gabe. There's totally different resonance in the energy.
Mm,
And it
mhm.
occurred to me that it's
Yes.
no accident that we've all done that. We've shortened our names, and I think you get lucky in the sense that your name is already what it is. But
Yeah.
the rest of us go through life with shortened versions of ourselves or shrunk down
Mm,
versions of ourselves. Like, whoa, that's what we're
mm,
doing to ourselves as a society, as people. We're shrinking ourselves and trying to condense ourselves, making ourselves like cogs in a wheel, which are
mm.
replaceable. Bob, Mike, Fred, Jiff, John, Bob, Dim, Bob, Bub, But these are all replaceable cogs, these one syllabic
Mhm.
utterances. But His Holiness the Dalai Lama, that's you can't just jam that into some other frame of reference. He's got
Mm.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama energy vibe. So
Right.
anyway, to answer your question, the rhythm and meaning and resonance of names was one of the things that hit home for me in a big way. The other thing that
That make yeah.
the other thing that happened is I had what I guess only later I realized you might call a Kundalini awakening, where I felt the energy. I was doing a meditation and felt the energy moving up and down my spine, and was like, oh, that's nice. That feels really good. And that was my first real experience of meditation actually does something and actually does move energy. And it's more than just sitting still and trying not to think. So I had that experience of like, oh, meditation really is something and it does something. So those are the two biggies.
What was the meditation? What like that Kundalini
It
awakening?
was
Can you explain?
so Osho has a whole bunch of different techniques that he taught. And if you go and visit there, you can do all of them, and they have them throughout the day. This particular one was a chakra meditation where you visualize a color and make a sound like with different vowels. I can't remember what they are now.
Mhm.
And you move up and down the spine, visualizing the color, making the sound, and you visualize drawing the energy up as you move from each one. And I started to notice, I was like, oh, I'm no longer just imagining this. This
Hmm.
energy is actually moving. And so, as I said, that was,
You felt
yeah,
it in your
I
body
felt the energy
moving.
moving.
Hmm. And the name is interesting too. It's like my partner is named Gabriella, and she does not like being called
Right.
Gabby. That does not work with her. So, but so I totally get that. But also, are you familiar with gematria? It's like the like it's like a Jewish mysticism that takes each
Mm,
letter of the alphabet and gives it a numerical value. And so, there's a different
yeah.
numerical value for
Right.
Alexander as opposed to Alex. So it
100%.
just kind of like you're playing a different card if you're Alex
Pun
than if you're
intended.
playing. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So how long were so you this was so your Saturn return happened in this happened in June, July of '03. That's when your Saturn return occurred. Um where were you then?
Let's see. I've
June.
kind of, I've actually tried to retrace these steps a few times to figure out exactly when. Um, I think I had, I think I just got back from India then. Um,
Hmm.
I can't remember if I was '02 winter into '03 spring that I was in India, or '03 winter into '04, but I think it was '02.
Mhm.
I think, yeah.
'02 into
Yeah,
'03
it was
spring, so
I was
you were
there
just
almost
back.
6 months. I
Yeah.
was there something like October to March or October to April.
Hmm.
Um, and so okay, I that would make, yeah, I think that's right.
Hmm. The Saturn return is like this period where, it's like your initiation into adulthood. Like
Mm,
you've been an adult now for about 10 years, 18, let's say maybe it's been a little more than 10, 12 or so. Uh and it's the planet of authority, and it's giving you an assignment that says,
mm,
uh follow your north node,
mm,
your soul's purpose. Most of us don't know what that is, and so we're just living our lives. Most of us are living in that south node frequency. So you were born with the south node in the seventh house, which is the house of marriage. You were born with the north node in the first house, which is the house of personality. These are both houses that are focused on
mm,
relationships. And so your first house is your relationship with yourself.
mm.
The seventh house is your relationship with another person. So you may have been predisposed to focus more on the other person rather than focus on
Mm.
yourself. And the Saturn return was about making things maybe more difficult for you in your personal relationships so that you could focus your attention on
That
yourself.
sounds about right.
Yeah. Okay.
Because as I
So
mentioned,
you,
that chasing the girl scenario
mhm,
didn't work out, and then that kind
exactly.
of really catapulted me to go on my own personal journey in India, which is what I had wanted to do anyway.
Yes. Okay. And so how did you feel when you got back to New York?
A little bit like a fish out of water, and
Yeah.
I mean, I was broke. I had spent all my money, and
Uh-huh.
I needed to figure out what I was going to do. And
What did you do?
I worked odd jobs, bartended. I did not want to go back to corporate America. I thought about it. I still had a good
Mhm.
resume,
Yeah.
and thought about it, but just couldn't bring myself to do it. Something really had shifted. So,
Mm.
it really did shift me in a fundamental way to go to India. and in a way that I just couldn't imagine going back to a corporate world, corporate journey.
Yeah.
But I was broke and, didn't really know what to do. I worked odd jobs, as I said, but soon enough, I couldn't afford to keep my apartment. And so I didn't really know what to do. I gave it up and I floated. I ended up getting a job in construction, doing some kind of logistical stuff, data entry stuff. And they let me sleep in the back room of their office on a mattress on the floor. This is like in a grimy construction yard.
Mm.
So that's what happened. I ended up homeless, and it was a really depressing situation. And the worst part of it was that I had terrible psoriasis and eczema all over my face, and I had diarrhea 10 times a day. So I had this
Wow.
terrible health issue, and I'm basically living in a construction yard. And yeah, but in me
Wow.
somehow, and it was interesting because I knew it even at the time. I was like, I can't go back. I can't go back to
Yeah.
corporate America, even though I'm a Harvard
Mm.
graduate and here I am, unemployed, homeless. But something in me was like, no, you can't go back to that life. And
Mm.
so, and there's a lot more. I don't know how deep into my story you want to go,
Deep as you want to go. Yeah. Deep.
there's a lot more in there. I'll go back a step. I'm going to tell you something that I've never told publicly. I'm going to
Wow.
tell it to you
Okay.
because I'm ready to
Amazing. Thank
tell it.
you. Yeah.
So while I was in India, my brother was subletting my apartment in the East Village of New York City, and found out about a month into when I was going to come home that he had gotten himself thrown in jail for assault charges. So he hadn't been paying the rent, needless to say. So I found out not only was I broke because I'd spent all my money to travel around India, I was going to be owing back rent, and I
Wow.
didn't want to lose my apartment. So I was suddenly faced with like, what the heck am I going to do? How am I going to pay this rent when I land back in New York City and I owe a couple months back rent? What am I going to do?
Yeah.
Um, the other part I didn't tell you about my backstory is that when I had been working in corporate America, I also had been partying really hard. I did the quintessential
Mm.
work hard, play hard New York City lifestyle. And so
Yep.
I was clubbing a lot and doing a lot of recreational drugs. And over the years, I got to know a couple of drug dealers pretty well.
Mm.
And from an internet cafe in India, I emailed my friend, and using code, we arranged for a drug deal because I had found at a local pharmacy in Goa, India, that they would sell me large quantities of ketamine. And
Mm.
ketamine was a really popular club drug in New York City at the time. But it was also really hard to
Mm-hmm.
find. And I found that I could get this large quantity of ketamine. So I emailed him, and using code, we called it meow mix or kitty litter. I was like, if I could
Mm-hmm.
get this quantity of kitty litter for you, would you want it? So we worked out a deal and a price. I went and bought can't remember. It was like 4 liters of ketamine,
Yeah.
big liter bottles, where you only need a
Mm-hmm.
tiny little bit. And so I bought
Wow.
these 4 liter bottles, and then I went to like supermarkets, and I bought shampoos and Ayurvedic medicine bottles, contact lens solution bottles, and dumped them all out, cleaned them all out really well, and then poured the ketamine into these various bottles and put them in my suitcase
Mm-hmm.
and walked them through JFK Airport customs.
Mm-hmm.
And that was how I landed on my feet back in New York City. Was this one
Wow.
time international drug smuggling operation. And even at the time,
That's amazing.
I laughed to myself that that's the cost of enlightenment.
Yeah.
It's the price of
Wow.
enlightenment.
Oh
So
my
that
God.
got me on my feet, and that kept me going for a
Jeez.
little bit. But it didn't last
Mm-hmm.
long. It wasn't that much money.
Right.
And then I was working odd jobs, like I said. Um, but then what happened? Like, so then I was homeless. As I said, I found myself living in a construction yard. The health issues were the thing that was the most depressing after, all is said and done.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to a doctor. I still had health insurance at the time, and I found a skin specialist, and he prescribed me this ointment for the rash all over my face.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, okay, great. Thanks, doc. Go home. I'm doing it, and it works. I don't have the rash as badly. It's mostly gone. I happen to notice around the bottom that I do not use for more than 2 weeks. Go back to the doctor. Doctor, it says do not use for more than 2 weeks. He looks at you like, all right, here you go. He gives me a different lotion.
Mm-hmm.
So I get that home. I look, it's the same thing. Do not use for more than 2 weeks. So I go back to the doctor and I say, hey, doc, what's the story on this? These lotions say do not use for more than 2 weeks, but I have this skin issue all the time. And I was
Mm-hmm.
31 at the time, 30, 31. I have this all the time. What am I supposed to do? I can't live like this. And I'll never forget it. He said, well, we can't cure it. The best we can do is manage the symptoms. And I had this moment, a big deja vu moment, like, what? You can't do anything
Mm.
about this? And I
Mm.
actually, another moment where something welled up inside of me and I even blurted out loud. I said, fuck that. I can't live like this the rest of my life.
Yes.
So I walked out of his office, never to return to allopathic medicine. I didn't know that at the time. But I'm
Mm.
telling you that part because that's the key piece in the next part of my adventure, my life journey, my Nine of Hearts story, is that I was living in this depressing situation, this construction yard. I still knew people. I still had friends in the party scene and party world. I went out to a party. I met a woman at a party who introduced herself as a shaman. She was an Israeli woman, and she was doing a juice cleanse, a 5-day master cleanse, 5-day juice cleanse. And I knew I needed to do it. I was like, I need to do this juice cleanse, but I couldn't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
And she refused to give me a discount. So I put my bank, I withdrew money using overdraft protection in my bank. So I basically took a loan out to do this 5-day juice cleanse. The first night of the cleanse, this guy came to teach us about the power of cleansing. His name is Kevin Schuker. And he told us story after story about people manifesting whatever they want by fasting for it. And he told
Mm.
a story about how he fasted for a new computer once. And at the end of the 10-day fast, he went down to his basement, and there, sitting by the recycling, was a complete computer setup, including
Wow.
printer. An older model, but a
Yeah.
whole computer and
A working
working
model of
model.
a
And
computer.
evidently, somebody had placed it down there, which we do sometimes. We
Mhm.
put stuff down in the basement. So he got a new
Yeah.
computer from that, or a working computer. So he told us story after story like that. And like, all right, now you write your intention for what you want for your 5-day juice cleanse. You would think, given my living situation and job situation and health situation, there would have been certain things I might have said I want to manifest and intend for myself. But no, I wrote down that I wanted to meet the mother of my children. In my
Mm.
mind, that meant the woman I was going to spend the rest of my life with. I want to meet the mother of my
Mm.
children. We were on the last night of the cleanse meeting at a sweat lodge just out of the city in the Bronx. And I was driving a beat up company pickup truck from the construction company where I was working. So we do a sweat lodge, and it was a group of about 30 of us. We hadn't really had a chance to all meet each other over the 5 days. But I was driving back through Manhattan to Long Island City where I was living. And I put my hand up and we're all saying goodbye. I said, does anybody need a ride back into the city? Big group of people. One woman
Yeah.
raised her hand.
Wow.
You know where the story
That
goes.
was the mother. That was the mother of your
That's
children.
the woman who became the mother of my children. And she became my
Okay.
first health coach too. And she got me started doing more deeper cleansing, doing colonics. And it was from a colon hydrotherapist that I found out I was gluten intolerant. I didn't even know what the word gluten
Mm.
meant.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, yeah, I told her all my symptoms. She's like, I bet you're just gluten intolerant. That's all. I'm like, okay, but what does that mean? And then when I realized it meant I had to give up all my favorite foods, it's like a
Mm.
death sentence to me. There was no Whole Foods at the time. There was no awareness
Mm.
of gluten in the general public. This is back in 2004. And it took me a long time. It actually altogether took me about 7 years of cleansing to heal my body, to finally give
Mm.
up gluten and totally restructure my diet. So it took a lot of juice cleansing and healing and detoxifying my body to heal my body from all the damage I had done over the years.
Have you read this book, Heal Your Body?
I've read many
Heal Your
things by
Body?
her, not that
Yeah,
one
yeah,
specifically.
Louise Hay, Your Body. I was just looking, like it says, eczema is breathtaking antagonism, mental
Mm,
eruptions. And so, when you think of like these physical ailments, they have like a mental, spiritual component to them.
yep.
So there's like, mantras in there to help heal those frequencies. But when I think of cleansing, and Virgo, your sign, you're a Virgo sun and a Virgo Mercury is the planet that rules Virgo's the sign that rules the
Mm,
intestines. Virgo's the sign that represents health,
mm,
diet. And so it would make sense that you were destined to become somebody who is very health conscious, or aware of your health, the situation with your health. Your north node, as I said, is in Capricorn, and it's aligning with Mars in Taurus, which is the sign that represents money and the
mm,
material. But both of those are also aligning with your
mm,
Mercury, the planet of the mind, and the Sun, the planet that represents the identity. So I think you having these like sort of health goals that are associated with the value of yourself, your self worth, like even going to the doctor and saying, fuck that, I'm not doing this. It's like that this doesn't work for me. My values are this, and I'm going to find another way. That's a very, you in alignment with your soul's
mm,
purpose, in a sense where you're taking a courageous step towards a goal, towards a peak that you don't even necessarily know if it exists, but you're like, you know what, I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm gonna try to find a way. And all that ninth house stuff with your moon, your Uranus and your Venus gave you the faith to find the answers.
Well, thank you for saying that. And you're absolutely right. There have been more than one occasion where that's true, where I took a step of faith, not even knowing if there was something on the other side. But the only thing I knew was that I couldn't go back that way. I have to go this
Mm-hmm.
way. I don't even know what I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
find there, but I can't. All I know is I can't go that way.
Yes. That makes a lot of sense. You're meant to go through these, potentially difficult transformations in your life. With Pluto, as I mentioned before, is squaring your Saturn, but it's also squaring your ascendant, which represents your face,
Mm,
your body, your personality. As you and Pluto's in the eighth house, which is the house of death, which is associated with the eighth sign, which is Scorpio. It represents intimate bonds, karmic bonds. And so it's like, as you go through these transformation of these intimate bonds, maybe one was with your father in relation to your mother, another was with your brother, not paying rent or getting arrested, and that putting you in a different difficult situation. You've had to go through these
mm.
transformations of your personality, maybe in terms of how people perceive you, or like the ex-girlfriend as well. So you met the mother of your children. You said you thought that meant this would be the person you were going to spend the rest of your life with. I know you allude in the book, or you talk about that in the book, that you ended up going through a difficult divorce. She was the mother of your children, but you're no longer with her.
Yeah, that's right. So to pick back up in the story, I mentioned she became my first health coach. Her dream had been to start her own holistic health studio, colon hydrotherapy center. And so we did that together. I brought in my marketing, sales, business, corporate background and was able to help her get her business started. We started it together and we did really well with it. We did so well that we opened a second location. And
Mm.
we also had two children and got married in a 5-year span. Later, much
Wow.
later, we were able to joke about it that in 5 years we got married, got divorced, started two businesses, and had two children.
Hmm.
It was a whirlwind. Um,
Yes. Wow.
but so what happened in my own journey is that the day after divorce papers were on the table, which was on my son's second birthday, I
Wow.
said, and that was a surprise. We'd gone to some marriage counseling, but that was a bit of a shock. It was another Nine of Hearts experience of like, whoa.
Yes.
Uh,
What was the date that that happened? That was
I could tell you. I can tell you because I have actually looked that up. I thought that was important.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
that would have been 2009
Mhm.
on November 6th.
November 6th. That's the, Scorpio, the sign of death, death and rebirth. And so and on that day, literally on that day, the moon was transiting through your seventh house, the house of marriage, and it was forming a conjunction with your Saturn, the planet of restriction. So, restriction to the emotional nature in with regards to relationships, and the moon was squaring your Pluto, the god of death. So, going through an emotional death and rebirth. Uh, Mars, the god of war, was transiting through your seventh house, the house of marriage. This was, you talked about the Saturn return,
Mm,
but this you were going through Saturn squaring Saturn,
mm,
which, some would say that's even more difficult than the return or the opposition, because when you're squaring off with someone, I mean, that's a fight. It's a 90-degree angle, it's a hard angle. So Saturn was transiting through your eighth house, the house of death, which represents intimate bonds. And it was squaring your Saturn in the house of marriage. So going through a very difficult restructuring of your relationship energy and what it means to be intimate with others
Thank you
on
for
that
saying
day.
that. How often or how
Yes.
common is that for Saturn to square Saturn?
So it happens at age 7. So it happened, right around the time
Yeah.
that you were moving to Fort
Yeah.
Lauderdale, as a surprise. The age 7 is kind of age 7, 8. That's when you start to realize that you're not your
Mm,
parents, that you are like your own person, and it's kind of a growing pain period. At 14 is when you have the Saturn opposition Saturn. That's another sort of growth spurt where you're like, oh my God, I'm not a little kid
mm,
anymore. I'm in this weird tweeny teen stage. 21 is the second Saturn square Saturn. That's when you're flushed out into the world and you're like, okay, now I guess I'm an adult now. I gotta, get a job and learn how to live life. And then the Saturn return happens 29, 30, 28 to 30. And then the third Saturn square Saturn happens around age
mm,
36, which is what happened to you in
mm.
2009. In addition to what was happening then, which only happens once in your life. If some people, it never happens, but that's when Pluto was crossing over your ascendant. So the god of death was transiting over the position that represents your face, your body, your personality, the essence of your
Mm,
soul. And as it was crossing over your ascendant, it was squaring your Pluto, which happens to everyone around age 38, 38 to 42, right around
mm.
then. So it's a very difficult transformative period where you're going through a transformation of how you see the world. It's kind of like a midlife crisis
Mm.
transit. So that was all
That's
happening
fascinating.
right then. Hmm.
It's inspiring me to want to learn astrology.
I'm here. I'm here. We can, we can share the knowledge with each other. I would love to work with you. So
I
tell me,
just really briefly to riff on that.
yeah,
I
yeah,
actually am really glad I did not know astrology when I came to these cards.
mm,
When I came to
yeah.
the cards, the people who knew them and were teaching them were all astrologers, and they would
Oh,
all
really?
talk astrology lingo. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just here to study cards. And
Yeah.
I think, in a large part, because I had no astrology preconceptions, I have been able to see the cards more purely in their meaning
Mm,
than overlaying astrological meaning on them. So I'm grateful that
yes.
I did come to the cards that way. But the way you're talking about astrology, it's really piquing my interest. I've never really had an interest in astrology, and
Hmm.
I've known my astrological chart. I've had it done several times. I've had my Vedic chart done a few times, but I've never been interested in studying it until right in this moment.
Wow, amazing. I'm honored that you're having this, this inspiration, so to speak. So you went to this party the night that you signed the
The
divorce
next,
papers, and that's
so
yeah,
divorce papers on the table on whatever day I said that, November 6th. The
yep,
next day, and so then we had our party. We had the birthday party for my son. It was, we
hmm,
had divorce papers. I didn't sign them. I just knew I'd been served. And then I had to go
hmm,
to the party and like keep a smile on and like pretend,
mm,
for my son's sake, all the friends and family
mm,
coming to the party. It's another story.
mm,
Um,
mm,
and so then the next day, kind of as we cleaned up and everything settled, I was kind of like, I got to get the heck out of here and go clear my head. I've been running a business and working hard and being a good, dutiful husband and father. We fought like cats and dogs, so I understand, And then later on, when I found out our cards to play, we're not a good match in the cards, so we can do
mm.
relationship dynamics with these cards, and
I
we're
love
not a
that. I
good
want to get
match.
into that.
Um,
Hmm.
but so anyway, go out. I was like, all right, I got to get out. I got to go to a party. I called up an old friend. He's like, yeah, there's a loft party in Brooklyn happening. Let's go. So this is Saturday, and it's November 7th,
Yep.
2009. And I walk
Yep.
in and blase, hanging out. And I see someone who I'd gone to Burning Man with, so I used to go to Burning Man. And he's like, hey, what's up? Blah, blah, blah. He's like, what's your birthday? I'm like,
Hmm.
August 30th. Why?
Yeah.
And now, keeping in mind what was going on in my life right in that moment, just getting the divorce papers and being kind of blindsided by it and feeling that emotional heartbreak and tragedy. So he's at a party, he's having a drink, he's casual. He's like, oh, what's your birthday? Like August 30th. Why? He's like, oh, blah, 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 blah. He's like, oh, your birth card is the Nine of Hearts. That means in
Mm.
this lifetime you're going to go through tragic endings of the heart, and you're going to have to learn how to let go and move on.
Wow.
I was like,
You fell over
I
backwards.
couldn't breathe, and like I had like my knees kind of wobbled. And I was like,
Yes.
and that was my first introduction to the real meaning of the playing
Wow.
cards. And I it didn't. I was still very skeptical, even though it hit home.
Uh-huh.
Like I
Yeah.
think the main reason why I went for the cards is I had already tried everything else at that point.
Mm.
I'd been to India. I'd worked with shamans. I'd done plant medicine ceremonies. I'd studied philosophy at Harvard. I'd been to seminary. I studied some Kabbalah, this, human design,
Mhm.
gene keys. I'd already looked into all these things. Astrology didn't hold anything for me at the time. And
Mhm.
I was still looking from the age 17 awakening that I had had of the what's the meaning of life. And when you
Yes.
said to me about moving forward in faith and not even knowing if or what I might find, that was it. That was what I was doing.
Mm.
I can't go back to something I know doesn't resonate. I can't go back to Christianity. I can't go back to this or that. Because I had friends who did that. They're like, well, I want some kind of faith for my kids and I want to raise my kids in something. So I'm going to go back to
Mm.
church because at least that's something. Like, I
Yeah,
can't do that. I
exactly.
can't go back.
Yeah.
So I think part of the reason why it all worked out the way that it did and why I found the cards when I did is that I had already exhausted all of the resources. Nothing else had made sense to me and really grabbed me as like, oh, this is the meaning of life. This is what your life is about. So that's how I first found the cards, was at that party.
So what was your first step after that party? Like, did you talk to this friend
Mhm.
of yours and say, "How did you learn about this? What does this
Yeah.
mean?"
Yeah,
Like,
we talked
what
for
was
we
the
yeah, we
path?
talked and we talked that night at the party. We had some drinks and chatted about it. Um,
Yeah,
I like I said, I was skeptical, even though I was
yeah,
blown away by it. But he'd been studying with someone named Robert Camp, and he
okay,
had books out, and I got those books, and I started studying it from him. And I was also studying human design and gene keys. I'd found those already, and I was studying those at the
mhm,
same time. So I was studying all three simultaneously.
mhm,
And my ex-wife and I, soon to be ex-wife, had, like I mentioned, been running this holistic spa together, colon hydrotherapy spa. And it was her dream, it was her business. So I was like, all right, you keep it. It was a little bit messy to figure out the finances to split the business and who
mhm,
got what. But I knew she was going to be keeping the business. So I knew I needed another, what am I going to do now? And so I
mhm,
was studying these various disciplines, thinking, I'll start doing readings for people with human design and gene keys, and maybe I'll bring in some cards. I'd also gone back to school to study nutrition after doing all the cleansing that I mentioned. So I had a degree in health coaching. I was doing health coaching as well. So I'm doing all these different kind of things, dabbling a little bit here and there. And I, the cards just spoke to me in a sense of
mhm.
like, I love the simplicity of them and the visual language of them. And
Yes.
there's plenty written about human design and also gene keys. And I thought, wow, there's not really hardly anything written about these cards. And I don't even really like the way this guy's teaching it, because he teaches it as a fortune telling system, as the destiny cards,
Mhm,
where you're going to do
mhm,
predictions for people. You're going to look up their
mhm.
cards. And I trained with him. So I learned how his method was. And so you're going
Yeah,
to predict for people what's going to happen for them next year or this coming year. And like, okay, that's nice. But something is like, there's more here. This isn't, there's not just a fortune telling system.
yeah.
So I was doing regular ayahuasca ceremonies still at the time. I was kind of had a lot of different currents of my spiritual growth.
Yes.
And what I did was I took a deck of cards with me into the ceremonial container and kind of put them on my mat in front of me. By this point, I'd already figured out that I wanted to white out. So I've since had my own deck made. Um, but like, here's a five of spades, but there's
Mm.
no,
There's no
yeah.
5.
I just had the inspiration. Like, I took a regular deck of cards, I bought whiteout, and I whited out the corners. And
Uh-huh.
like, wow, that really changes things.
Yeah.
You can really see the symbolism. And there's the four.
Mhm.
Now, I've since
Mm.
had my own deck printed, and we restored it to the sacred geometric proportions. So these are longer. The regular deck of cards is like about that tall. So they're restored to the
Oh,
sacred geometric proportions. But I
okay.
didn't know this at the time, and I just had my deck, my regular deck from CVS, from drugstore, and that I put
Yes.
white out on the corners, and
Mhm.
I brought it with me into the ayahuasca ceremony, and I set my intention. Well, what are these? What does this mean? What is this all about? And not all at once, but over a period of time, it started to come through. I started to see that this was sacred geometry, and it all
Yes.
comes out of the tree of life and the flower of life. That all of these pip arrangements are the different spherot on the tree, and so you can
Mm.
map them from that. I don't know yet what it all means, but that is where it comes from. And
Hmm.
it's a visual symbolic language. So I
Yes.
started to get that information. I'm like, oh, that's what this is. So then realizing that it was a lot more than a fortune telling system, that it really does reveal the fabric of reality itself, that was kind of how I started off on my own journey. But it was kind of bit by bit of like, well, okay, I thought I was going to do human design readings. No, maybe gene keys readings, maybe all three at once. Well, I'm doing health
Mhm.
coaching. That was the way I had clients from my nutritional coaching. I started to bring the cards into my nutritional coaching with clients, and gradually it just took over. My clients,
Hmm.
yeah, I know I need to eat more kale, but tell me about that six of diamonds again. That was a lot more interesting.
Yeah.
so, um, so that was
Wow.
how it sort of just flowed and merged into that, and
Yes.
it was kind of, I mean, it was very risky and crazy in a sense. My family thought I was crazy. My mom's like,
Yeah.
"When are you going to get a job?" I'm like, "No, mom, this is what I'm
Mhm.
going to do. I'm going to read people's cards." Like, what?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
But because that's how my life had made sense, I figured like, oh, nine of hearts. And after many months of reading, studying, and ceremony, it's like, wow, this really makes sense. And if this helped me to make sense of my life, then I want to share this with other people too. But yeah, it was very slow going in the beginning to convince people to do readings with me from the deck of playing cards, and that it wasn't a gimmick, it wasn't fortune telling,
Yep.
not like gypsies were doing. It's the sacred geometric patterns of our existence. It's the building blocks of reality.
I feel so much synastry with your story, because I have it's similar like my story with astrology. It's like it just kind of came to me. I was never into astrology. I mean, I had some awareness of it, but I didn't buy into the fortune
Mm,
telling aspect and like the horoscopes and the newspaper and that sort of stuff. And then I just kind of stumbled upon its wisdom through a screenplay I was writing with a friend. It was like a historical piece, and I wanted to learn more about these people. And so I found their birth dates and I started to look things up. And I was like, wait a second, this is exactly like the people that I'm
mm,
researching. There's maybe more to this than I had given it credit.
mm,
Um, and then I started drawing the
mm.
symbols. And I started drawing, the charts, and I started to realize that this is sacred
Mm,
geometry. This is not just
mm.
random stuff here.
Right.
Like even the way that all the lines go, 30 degrees, 60, 90, 120, 180, these, you put them together, you build like the, uh, sacred geometrical
Mm,
symbols. And so, it helped me understand
right.
myself. And so I was like, I think I can do this to help other people understand themselves. And of course, my family and friends were like, we already thought you were crazy because you wanted to be a screenwriter. Now you're saying you want to be an astrologer. Do you need mental
Right.
help? And I'm like, I'm already
You like,
seeing
it's
a
right there in
therapist.
my
Thanks.
chart that you would think that.
Exactly. Yes. So I am a very visual person. And so, like, looking at the cards and looking at the symbols and looking at the placement of the symbols on the card, like, that's very special to me. And I've looked on your website too, and I see like where you have like layouts of the cards, and you're like, this is the flower of life. And it all kind of makes sense, even though I don't understand it. But, um, how, like, the thing that really kind of blows my mind about the cards, and I want to continue with the story, but I also want to kind of veer off and just and get your understanding of like the origin of the cards. Like when I think about the power of these cards, like I was just telling Gabriella today, I was like, do you understand how powerful these cards are? Like these cards have built cities. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, Las Vegas? Like that there would be no Las Vegas if there was no deck of cards. It doesn't matter, like, yeah, the slot machines and the craps table and all that, but really it's all about the
That's right.
cards. And so like these cards have literally built civilizations. They built
Yes, that's
cities.
what they're for.
And
We built
Yeah.
an entire city on the fake meaning of the cards. This is
Yes,
what I feel, and I
exactly.
have like shivers as I say
Yes.
this, that I
Yes.
believe that these cards are to build the civilization on our planet. And I
Mm,
believe they were given to us a long, long time ago by an advanced race of beings for that purpose, to help us build civilization on this planet. And I thank you for segueing that in, because I sometimes am hesitant to say that, because I mean no disrespect to other esoteric systems. If people
mhm,
love their human design or their tarot cards, astrology, of course, and
mhm,
yet these cards are the foundation of all of it, because
mm,
they show the way that our reality is constructed. Our reality, so quantum physics, studying string theory, finding whatever it is now, 11, 12 different vibrating strings. My theory is that as quantum physicists dive deeper into the quantum field, they're going to find that there are 13 vibrating strings across four quadrants of being, and that
mm,
some very advanced civilization has been able to map the vibrating frequencies that make up our space-time matrix and put it in a simple conceptual frame of reference, so that we can understand the sea of energy inside of which we are and have a conceptual symbolic reference point for our human experience. And then from that foundation, we can much more clearly map the stars and all the other aspects of our being. And the tarot cards, the archetypal stories of human nature, then layer on top perfectly on top of these building blocks that are really just building blocks. And then from
mm.
there, we create our stories, and then we can navigate more clearly by the stars once we have this basic foundation. And that's the really interesting part about it. You hit the nail on the head that these cards have built cities, and
Yeah,
that's what they're for. They're
yeah,
to build civilization with. That's And when we restore the right meaning of them, the true meaning of them, that's when I think we can build an enlightened civilization on this planet.
wow. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I think like when I was reading in your book and you're explaining the history of the cards or the origin of the cards, it reminded me of my research on the origin of
Mm,
astrology. And it's like there there is no answer. It's like it led me to the same conclusion, like
mm,
the conclusion that you have for the cards, that it was like a higher race of being that shared this knowledge with the living beings that were here on this
yeah,
planet, because we know that the ancient Babylonians used astrology, but we don't know the origin of it. We don't know where it came from. And when you think about like 52 cards, 52 weeks of the year, 4 seasons, for suits of cards, when you think of astrology, there's 4 elements,
hmm,
there's 12
hmm,
signs, 12 months of the
hmm,
year, 12 disciples,
hmm,
4 seasons, and you think of like the moon every 28 days, it's actually, there should be 13 months, not 12, because 28 times 13 is like 364. So there is like this correlating connection, I feel like, between astrology and the
yeah.
cards.
It
And
perfectly matches.
yeah, yeah. And then when you think of just like religion too, like the 12 disciples,
Yep,
and
that's no
and
coincidence.
all, and you mentioned like the magi going to find Jesus,
Yep,
and they were like of the
yep.
Zoroastrian religion. And yeah, I mean, it just like, this all makes
It's all
sense.
coming back to light.
Yes, it
It's all
is.
coming back to light. And, to your point about the origins of astrology, it really is fascinating. Like, how would anyone ever think to map the sky the way that it is? Because it is actually relatively arbitrary. You just cut it up into
Yeah,
these 30-degree chunks, but yet
yeah,
it's accurate. and it
Yeah, it makes
works.
sense.
And it's like,
Yeah,
how would you figure out
exactly.
how to do that? How would you know that?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, exactly. So it is like we're coming into this awakening period. Like I think like we're in the age of
Mm,
Pisces. It's like the age of Pisces began with the birth of Christ.
mm,
He is symbolized by the fish, and Pisces is symbolized by the fish. He turned water into wine. I'll make you fishers of men. Like these are all Piscean
mm,
themes. But even more so than that, like the number one theme of Pisces is suffering,
um,
and nobody suffered
mm,
more, in terms of like how history is written, than Jesus Christ dying on the cross. And ultimately he did that because he had
mm,
faith that he was doing what his father needed him to do. And that is what Pisces is about. It's about faith. But Pisces rules the oceans. And so it's hard to, what do we know about the oceans? We know hardly anything.
mm,
It's hard to see in
mm,
there. We don't know what's going on in there. And so as we're reaching the end of the age of Pisces, things are getting more and more cloudy. It's harder to tell what's real and what's fake.
mm,
But at the same time, through that frequency, we're gaining deeper faith within ourselves, and it's helping us go deep within to really look at like, what does this deck of cards mean? Like, is it just for fun playing? This is my grandma playing bridge,
mhm.
or there's something more to it. And then when I read your book, I was like, this could not be more like me. I don't even understand. Like, why is November 13th the seven of clubs?
Oh, I was going to ask your birthday. Now I actually have your birthday because now I can look up the
Yeah.
rest of your cards. November
Yeah,
13th.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah. So then you have the persona of the Jack of Clubs. And
Hmm.
that's,
Which also makes sense for me
yeah.
too.
And that's a little bit like your ascendant in astrology. It's your face, it's your personality. Yeah.
Yes. It makes so much sense. Like I've been really obsessed with I've been watching I never watched this show, but I finally got into it, Yellowstone. And like the writer of the show, Taylor Sheridan, I don't have his birth time. So I've just been kind of perplexed. Like I gotta know more about him. He was born on the cusp, and I'm like, is he a Taurus? Is he a Gemini? I can make an argument for both. But I looked him up in your book, and he's May 21st, which is the Jack of
Oh,
Clubs. And I'm like, no wonder I feel such an
mm,
affinity with this guy. He feels like an alter ego for
mm.
me. Like I I'm not him, he's not me, but I feel like if I was in another life, I would maybe be him. It's kind of
Yeah.
like that. And I tie that in between that, my personal card being
Personality card. Yeah.
personality card being his birth card.
Very much so. You
Yeah.
would have a simpatico. And Jack of
Yes.
Clubs, it's very creative mental energy. A lot of writers and storytellers with that Jack of
Yes.
Clubs energy. But Seven of
Yes.
Clubs, you're primarily interested in spiritual knowledge. Yeah.
Yes. And that's why, getting into astrology make total sense. I was like, when I recognized what it was and I'd never seen it this way, I'm like, I feel like the most interesting puzzle I could
Mm,
ever imagine just landed in my
mm,
lap, and suddenly I
mm.
understand it. And I understand it way more than I should. It makes so much sense. I'm like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Forget the writing and all that. I'm doing the astrology thing, and I'm going to help people understand this. And that's what I've been doing for the last nine
Have you been
years.
writing about it?
Yeah, I mean, I've got my podcast, and then I did do like a weekly email
Mm,
for several years. I've kind of tapered off of that, but I write to my clients
okay.
all the time, and like when the clients, especially the ones that I meet with on a weekly basis, I give them kind of a write up. So it's always just sort of honing and
The
crafting
way the reason
my
I ask is
vocabulary.
because
Yeah.
the Seven of Clubs is the spiritual knowledge and your interest in
Hmm.
spiritual knowledge, but also your ease with it, your facility with it, which is why it's easy for you. And so
Yes.
that's your birth card. I'm holding my hand up for those who can see that. This is your Seven of Clubs. And then your Jack of Clubs is the persona. So you filter all the light of the Seven of Clubs through the Jack of Clubs. And the Jack of Clubs is a writer, someone who is a storyteller. So you would have a lot of spiritual knowledge to share and teach and write. That's why I asked if you were
Yes.
writing. But a podcast also
Yes.
fulfills that as well.
Exactly. Yeah, that's I just kind of do a stream of consciousness thing, once a week and share what's going on astrologically and how to work with the energy. But why is November 13th the 7 of
Okay, good
clubs?
question. Before I answer that, I want to circle back and
Yeah.
say that my personality card is the Seven of Clubs. So that's
Yes, I
our
saw that.
affinity.
That's exactly. Reading your book and then seeing your videos on Instagram, I was like, I feel like I'm going to have a vibe with
Well,
Alexander. Like
that's exactly we would, and it's in the cards, bum that we would.
Yes.
And so then relationship synastry is really powerful, simple tool with the cards. It's my wife's favorite part of it is the relationship
Mm,
energy. Because we have my personality card, your birth card are the same, we're going to have a lot to talk about. We're going to have an ease, an intimacy, facility of dialogue, and we're going to have a lot
yes.
of the same shared experiences in life. And the same, because
Mhm.
the Seven of Clubs, spiritual knowledge, we're going to have the same interests, and we do. And
Absolutely.
so the only difference is that my primary energy is the Nine of Hearts. So I'm filtering all my heart energy through the spiritual knowledge that I'm here to share. So for me,
Mm,
that's been a challenge slash opportunity is to get in touch with my heart and to be heart based in everything that I'm doing and
mm.
teaching. And whereas your basis already is your spiritual knowledge. So you're coming forth from your spiritual knowledge through your Jack of Clubs, and then you're teaching it and writing it and sharing it. So
Yes.
just different mechanics of how that plays out.
No, it makes
Yeah.
total sense, and I mean, it makes sense why I can relate to so much of your story.
Yeah.
Like even like the, clubbing, partying. I was doing that whole thing in LA while you were doing it in New
That
York.
was fun.
And oh yeah, it's a great time. I mean, my 20s
Yeah.
and parts of my 30s were really wild and a great time. But then also like the spiritual
Yeah.
awakening as a teen. You know, even though you were Catholic, I was Protestant. It was similar experiences
Yeah.
there. And then getting into college, it was maybe a little earlier for me is when I realized I was talking to other people that were a part of these youth groups, and they were so hard
Yeah.
edge about other people. It felt too judgmental to
Right.
me. I'm like, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like God's more forgiving, or Jesus is,
Right.
or yeah.
Christianity put a velvet rope around Jesus and like VIP entrance only.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
You gotta say the
What a
password before we let you in to see Jesus.
Yeah. No, that's not
No,
Jesus.
it really isn't. It's the opposite.
It's the opposite of
Yeah.
that. Yeah, he's something that we can all
It's
harness on our
accessible to
own.
everyone. You don't need to say the magic
Yes,
password to get access to Jesus.
exactly. Yes.
And we could talk about that along. I have a lot to say about that. That's a whole other conversation. But to answer your
Mm,
question, why November 13th? So there's a simple formula to calculate the card of the day, and it's two times, oh my goodness, am I going to say this? Yeah, two times the month plus the day subtracted from 55. And why exactly it's this formula, I have some theories on it. That's a much deeper dive into the nuts and bolts of this.
mhm.
But it's 55 minus two times the month plus the day.
So that would be that's the month is
Yep,
11, so
22.
22
uh,
plus 13 would be that'd be
35.
35.
So 55
35.
minus 35 equals 20. And
Yep.
20 is the number of the seven of clubs. So the cards have a
Why is
number
that?
1 through 52. And the
Okay,
hearts are
right.
the first.
Mhm.
So 1 through
Yep.
13. Then 14 through 26 are the clubs. 27
Okay.
through 39 are the diamonds. And 40 through 52 are the spades.
Or the
So they
spades.
all have a
Okay,
value,
cool.
a number value. And
Okay,
the
I
seven of
love
clubs
that.
is number
Awesome.
20.
And how do you determine like that because I'm the 7 of clubs, that I have genius insights, big picture thinking, rhetoric skill, quick study, jumping to conclusions, negative thinking, assuming the worst, etc. Cynical criticism. Like, how does that
That's
determined by the seven of
that's a
clubs?
that's a really good question, and I feel like that's been a big part of what my contribution is to this knowledge base is how to read this pattern as a visual language, not like
Hmm.
memorizing what does a seven mean or what do the clubs mean. The way it came to me, and it really came to me, is that this is a visual symbolic language. You read it
Yes.
like you would read a Chinese character.
That's how I look at astrology, the same way. It's a language.
So this center pip is either high or low. It's never
Okay.
in the middle. You have the 1 through
Right.
6, and then you have the 8 through 13 in the suit. The 7 is the only asymmetric one. All the others, if you look at them, you have that pack of cards in front of you. You can look at them
Hmm.
after we're off the podcast. All the other patterns are symmetrical except for the 7. So, like the 6
Hmm.
is two straight lines. And
Yep.
again, all these
Yep.
patterns come out of the flower of life, tree of life. So the 7
Yes.
is asymmetric in its visual depiction. What
Yes.
does asymmetric thinking look like when it's above center?
I don't
Genius
know.
insights.
Okay.
What does
Okay. Yeah.
asymmetric thinking look like when it's below
Oh,
center?
right.
Like self-doubt,
Cynical
cynical,
criticism. Yes,
right?
exactly.
And
Wow.
this kind of search, try to find the middle ground, this fruitless search
Uh-huh.
because you can never find it,
Yep.
that leads
Yeah.
to a lot of the imbalance and the
Yeah.
flip-flopping back and forth
Yes.
of your
It
energy
makes so
pattern.
much sense.
The other way to look at it is like a bell curve. And again, this is all stuff that just came to me. Like, this is how it
Yep.
is. So
Totally.
you look at a bell curve, and then here's the median. This
Hmm.
pip is always one standard deviation away from the middle. So you're
Right.
either a thought leader or you're behind the curve. You're falling behind
Mm.
and doubting
Yes.
yourself and feeling like you missed out.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
just based on this simple visual placement, I derived all those words that you referenced,
Makes so
and
much
I did it for
sense.
all the cards based on the patterning.
Wow.
What does this pattern tell us? And I meditated on it,
Hmm.
reflected on it. It took me 5 years to write that book that you're referencing because I
Yeah.
really meditated on the meaning for each of the 52. What does this pattern actually communicate? And then how do you put it in layman's terms with words that people can understand? My wife still doesn't think that I managed to do that. She still teases me that my words are a little too highfalutin for people to understand. But you're a
No.
club, so you love words.
Yeah.
People who
Okay.
aren't, let's say they're a diamond based person, let's say the 7 of diamonds, they don't vibe with words because diamonds is the physicality. And so all my
Mm.
words for them, they're like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? But I was simply doing my best to describe in words this flip flopping experience when it happens in your physicality. Anything that's in your physical domain, your finances, the things that matter to you, your health. What does that translate to? This visual patterning, when you're playing this as your birth card and this is your avatar, what's that going to look like for you in everyday layman's terms? And that's what I attempted to do in the book, is write it that way as a translation of the visual language.
So it's obvious why the hearts would
The heart.
represent like
Yeah.
emotion or the heart, and then the diamond physical because like a diamond is a physical stone. The
It's
club,
a clover.
why is that the
It's a
clover?
clover. It's a nutritious weed.
Clover.
If you look up the meaning of a clover, it's a perfect meaning
Okay.
for the mind. It's a nutritious
Oh,
weed. It grows anywhere.
okay. And what about the
The
spade?
spade is an acorn. So
Acorn.
here's the 9 of spades. The spade is an
Hmm.
acorn, and classically, the acorn is a symbol of the pineal gland. Like the Pope has a
Mm.
acorn on the top of his golden staff.
So what does that represent? Like
Vision, yeah,
spirituality,
vision,
vision,
faith, imagination.
faith.
It also represents, in the same way that an acorn can grow into the whole oak tree, and like the parable of the mustard seed, you plant this tiny seed and the whole thing grows from there. It represents the idea that we are three in one beings. We're not just a mind or a heart or a body. I'm
Mhm.
pointing to my gut because
Mhm.
diamonds represent
Mhm.
the gut on the body. We're
Mm.
all three in one that begin in the vision that we have, and this tiny seed that we plant when we have a faith or belief. That's who we are, and it grows from that seed. So people who are born into the spade suit, they're the dreamers and the doers.
Mm.
But more often than not, they get disconnected from the dreaming and they just end up being workaholics. They're just doing,
Mm.
doing, doing. Clubs like
Interesting.
can be stuck in your mind and get neurotic.
Yes.
Hearts
Yes.
overly
Very neurotic.
sentimental and
Yeah.
codependent.
Yep.
Diamonds greedy and superficial.
That vacillation, like you were saying, like I was telling Gabriella, I was like, yeah, it makes so much sense because I vacillate between thinking I'm the smartest person that's ever lived and the dumbest person on planet Earth.
Right. You're describing
It's
that
like,
visual pattern. And
exactly.
it,
I'm like,
and it goes back and forth in one day.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Totally. Yeah. It's constantly flipping back
Yep.
and forth.
So your whole experience is going to be primarily this pattern with all the other 12
Yes.
overlaid on it, the secondary, the jack of clubs, but then all the others as well. And then every year you have cards to play. There's like your transits from astrology terms.
Hmm.
But primarily, this seven of clubs is the primary experience that you are going to have in this lifetime. And
Mm.
it was through these cards that I finally really saw what all the sages and masters and teachers have talked about in terms of witnessing your thoughts. You are not your thoughts, to see who you are as pure spirit, essence, being.
Yes.
It was by understanding my cards to play that I was finally able to be like, oh, that's the nine of hearts experience of my life.
Mhm.
That's not me. All those
Mm.
emotional tragedies and heartbreaks, that's the theme that I came to explore. That's not
Mm.
who I am. I am what we can't even name it. We can't say what I am, but I'm not
Mm.
all these life experiences that I keep having, all these patterns that keep recurring. So that was after my long spiritual journey, that was finally the way I got it. Like, oh, that's
Mm.
what all these people have always been talking about when they say you are that and you're not any of this life experience. You're not your mind, your body. You're not this, you're not that. These cards for me really crystallized it and made it simple. And in your case, you're going to have all of these mental flip flops and mental gymnastics, and you will have genius insights, but you'll also have self
Mhm.
loathing. And that
Yes.
pattern is going to recur at the baseline behind all the other patterns of your life. And when you see it as a pattern and you kind of pop out of it, you're like, oh, I'm not this pattern. I am pure beingness, pure essence, that I'm
Mm.
here to have this game and have this experience and play out this pattern.
Yes. So many questions.
It wouldn't
Then
You would
then
not be born to
then
play the seven of clubs if you didn't have all these questions.
Well, one that's jumping up right now is just in terms of, and you kind of alluded to it in the book, but I want some clarity on this, specifically about my partner
Mm,
because she was born late at
uh-huh.
night, just before midnight. So, uh, are we looking at the time zone she was in for her birth? Or are we looking at like Greenwich
True
Mean
time, true
Time,
solar time.
which is what? Where is that? That's like in Greenwich Mean
That's
Time?
no,
Is
that's
that?
where the sun actually is in the sky. So it can get a little tricky with daylight saving time and time zone if people are born close to midnight. There is undoubtedly a way to do it mathematically. What I've found is that within minutes, when I talk to someone, if they're confused,
Yeah.
I'll just ask them a few
Mhm.
questions because it's either one card or the other, right?
Yep.
And in your
Yeah.
case, it'd be, let's say, for example, either seven of clubs or six of clubs. I'd be like,
Right.
do you mentally flip flop? No, that doesn't happen to me. Do you get stuck in
Yeah.
rigid thought lines that don't change? Yeah,
Mm.
that's probably more accurate.
Mm.
So usually
Okay.
within a couple of questions, I can figure out
Yeah.
which one is the actual one. But it's a
Yeah.
good point because it does get a little tricky if it's close to midnight.
Right. Yeah, because I've been looking at both of hers, either it's September 30th or October
Well, that's a
1st.
big
And
difference. Let me just
um,
look that up for
yeah.
you. September 30th or October 1st. Well, September 30th is the Seven of Hearts. Is
Hmm.
she, well, seven? You know what the seven means now. Does she flip flop a lot emotionally?
Yeah, she does. I think so.
Because
Yeah.
alternatively, it's the Eight of Diamonds where she's the boss.
I would say that I don't know. It's tough. I would say maybe more seven of hearts.
Let's look at the personality
But
cards. The Eight of Diamonds has the Three of Hearts as the
okay.
personality. Three of Hearts is really
Hmm.
passionate and creative.
Okay. And then
Five of
what's the
Spades,
seven?
like, would mean she's always in motion. She's always doing something.
That feels more like the eight with the
My
three.
instinct is it's
Three
the
of
eight and the three because Seven of Clubs,
yeah.
Jack of Clubs, you have a better relationship with the Eight of Diamonds, Three of Hearts than you do with the Seven
Uh-huh.
of Hearts, Five of Spades. You're much more
Okay.
simpatico with that Eight of Diamonds energy.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering too because I was looking at the seven of hearts in the life path, and I don't show up
No,
there
you don't.
for her. But I don't think I show up either for the eight
You're
of
the soul
diamonds.
gift card. You're a gift
Okay,
for
yeah,
her.
yeah, that makes more
I'll tell
sense.
you this
Yeah,
too, that
definitely
the
does.
Seven of Hearts,
Yeah,
I'll tell you a funny card nerd joke.
yeah.
The Seven of Hearts would be like, "Oh, you could call me whatever you want if you really want to call me
Oh no,
Gabby." And then
no, no,
secretly
no.
she'd be like resentful and bitter. The Eight of
Mm,
Diamonds, as I said, they're the boss. They're the
yeah,
alpha. Then you don't fuck with
yeah,
them. And so that
yeah.
story just by
She's
itself,
not really yeah, she's not really like, I think she's a very intimidating
Eight of
presence,
Diamonds.
but she doesn't see that in herself. She's
Welcome to the story, my
she
friend.
do
Welcome
yeah,
to
she
what
doesn't
we do
understand.
for a
I'm
living.
like
Why people need our support because they don't quite see it fully.
exactly. "You don't understand how intimidating you are." Not to me necessarily, but to other people. She's like, "Really?" Like, because I'm like, "Nobody." I don't understand why you're afraid of anyone, because like if I was coming down a dark alley, like I'd be afraid of
Yeah.
you and not the other way around,
So we
It's
just solved that
yeah,
problem in like 2 minutes
yeah,
that she's
yeah.
definitely the Eight of Diamonds energy because that is the alpha energy. You don't fuck with them.
Yeah, that makes more sense. And because she was born East Coast daylight savings time at uh, between 11 and midnight.
So then
So
she would have been actually an hour the other direct. Wait,
daylight savings time, it would have been fall back. So it would have
she would have been
been
in the next day.
in
Yeah. So there we
exactly.
go. So we
Yeah.
solved it.
Yeah. Because of the daylight
Yep.
savings time. Yeah, exactly. Because it's the fall back. It'd be in midnight the
So you
next
guys
day.
have an
Yeah.
interesting dynamic. You're a gift for
Yeah.
her, but she's a challenge for you.
I know, I saw that. I told her that and she didn't like that, but I'm like, "You don't like it. I'm the one that has to deal with the challenge." So
The good news is that she is very stable. The Eight of Diamonds
Mm,
is rock solid, where
yeah,
you're
she
flip
is.
flopping, and so you would
Yeah.
be like a catalyst for her, and she would be
Mhm.
your grounding rod.
Yeah, she definitely does ground me for sure. And she is a stable support system for me. It's like my business really took off when I moved in with her.
Interesting.
That's when
Eight
it
of
was
Diamonds
like,
have great business instincts.
okay, yeah. And she gives some insight and advice on the business side, but really I think it's just, having her
Sure,
support
and her
and
energy. Eight of
her
Diamonds,
energy. Yeah.
they're like CEOs. They can be if they want to be. They are the
Yeah, that's
alphas, and they
definitely
can
her.
be the ones that rise to the top of the business world.
Yeah, and I think that's really where her strengths lie, because her north node is in the 10th house in Aries, which is about achievement and reaching that pinnacle. Yours is in the first house, which is associated with Aries, but it's in Capricorn, which is the 10th sign. So it's like a different version of her north node, where you are learning to take responsibility for yourself and your sense of person, like how you present yourself in the world, how you want to be perceived by others, as somebody who has something to leave behind that has meaning and
Interesting.
value.
That's
Yeah.
really helpful. That's timely advice, which I can tell you about
Mm.
off. We can talk about that off camera.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
time. That's
For
timely.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, if you're looking, if you're somebody who is, because relationships are always such a huge deal for people. Like I can really see why your wife would love that
Right.
aspect of it. It's like the number one question I get from every woman that I'm that I'm doing work with. They want to know about their relationships. How does one understand if they match? Is it by just looking at the life path and say,
That's the
okay,
Yeah. That's the starting point.
yeah,
And
hmm,
here's a good place to draw a really valuable distinction between the cards and astrology. I think that astrology, you can get a lot more detailed breakdowns, and you've mentioned some of the
yes,
things with the placements and the houses. The cards, you get really quick and dirty, simple kind of building blocks, big picture, like I was able to do for
yes,
you and Gabriella. Like the basic
hmm,
dynamic is that you're a gift for her and she's a challenge for you. We could say more about that in as much as if you are someone, which I feel like you are based on what you've told me, that you want to challenge yourself to grow, then
mm,
having that dynamic would be exactly what your soul wants because you want
yes,
that challenge to challenge yourself to grow more, right?
yes,
So we
absolutely.
get these really broad strokes, which are 100% accurate. And then I think in astrology, you can dive down into a lot more detail. But to answer your question, yes, you look at the life path as the starting point. There's more to it. There's, are you in the same suit? How do the numbers connect to each other? Like even if you weren't in the same in the life path, for instance, the 7 of clubs to the 8 of clubs, you're not in each other's life path, but because you're in the
Hmm,
same suit with one number difference, you would have a lot
mm,
of intimacy and connection with the 8 of clubs. Same with the 6 of clubs because you're just one number apart in the same suit.
mm,
In the life path, you would look to see the planetary placements. So again, this is the primary way to look. You would see the planetary placements, and then as an astrologer, you would know this well that if someone is your
yeah,
Jupiter card, then you're going to have an expansive, abundant dynamic. If they're your Saturn card,
hmm,
then you potentially have friction, but they're also going to teach you things. And so
right,
these really
sure.
simple buckets that we can put people in and see what's accurate and in a quick and dirty way that I like. I actually don't like necessarily getting lost in all the arcane stuff. I like the simplicity of it myself.
Yeah, I like the simplicity, especially in terms of like, people always ask me with astrology, it's like, well, I got to get the date, time, and place of the, and
Yeah,
you ask a guy
right.
like, what's your birth time, and they never know, and they don't know where their birth certificate is, and I always say like, have they ever left the country? Do they have a
Right,
passport? Then they've got a birth certificate lying around
right,
somewhere, because you don't get a
right.
passport unless you've shown them your birth
But you
certificate.
also
But the
you
simplicity,
also have to show your cards, pun intended, when you ask that question. The birthday is a
yeah,
lot more
totally.
innocuous. Hey, what's your birthday?
Exactly. And so you can just look at the birthday here and say
Yeah,
like, okay, does this match up? Now, like if I'm looking, like say, I'm looking at my birth card, and there's a potential match for me, and I'm not seeing them in the life path, would it be a good idea for me to look at my personality
yep,
card and look at the life path
yep.
there and say, oh, look at, they land in my life path for my personality
Exactly.
card.
You can
So
do that. You can
yeah,
also do the reverse and look at their life path and see where you land and if you land in their life path or their
right.
personality card
Yes.
path. So there's
Mm,
more to the story, because you can also look at what are called vertical dynamics, which I don't get into in the book, which are like
mhm.
underlying dynamics. And you, there's other layers of complexity which I won't get into on the show, but
Right.
primarily you would look at what you said: the life path, birth card, personality card, and then do the reverse for yourself to their life path. And then it also can get interesting, because let's say your card is the Saturn card for their birth card pathway, but then
Mhm.
it's the Venus card in their personality card pathway. So then you have a Saturn
Mm,
and a Venus relationship.
right.
So you have a lot of love, but you also may have some life lessons to learn together. And more often than
Yes.
not, that's what I see is people have multiple types of card connections in their life paths together.
Yes. That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I tell everyone when I look at their chart with another chart, I'm like, there's going to be gifts and
Yeah.
challenges. It's like, there's no like, it's perfect. Wow. Like, and it is perfect.
Right.
It's perfect exactly the way that it is, but it's not perfect necessarily in that fairy tale happily ever after fantasy that we've been sold as kids. There's going to be challenges there, but those challenges are what help create the growth that's necessary to really enjoy the goodness that comes through the bond that's shared through two souls
Well, that's
connecting.
right. And I like to tell people that if it were easy, we'd get bored.
Exactly. Exactly. So I just want to ask, I think, one last question. What does it mean to play your cards right?
Ooh.
What does that mean?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I'll say it this way, that there were times, not recently, but years ago, I'd see a meme going around on social media where the question would be like, if you could give one sentence of advice for your life or to your younger self. And, all people would write all kinds of one sentence answers. And I wrote, well, the answer is to play your cards right. That really
Hmm.
sums it all up, literally. And I love the fact that there's so many card expressions in our language. He's
Hmm.
not playing with a full deck. They're well suited for each other. Don't get
Yes.
lost in the shuffle, because you shuffle the cards and deal them
Mm,
when you do a reading. There's so
mm,
many card expressions, but that one in particular, play your cards right. And it's funny to me because I'll hear politicians drop it in a speech. Like, yeah, I remember Barack Obama at one of his first speeches. He's like, yeah, we were dealt a bad hand of cards and we're just trying to play
mm,
our cards right here. That was more like Bill Clinton, I think,
mhm.
than Obama.
Yeah,
I was like, wait
exactly.
a minute, that was more like Bill. Anyway, so these expressions filter into popular discourse, but the literal meaning of play your cards right is you as a soul, for lack of a better word, you're here to play out this seven of clubs plus the jack of
Mhm,
clubs plus your whole hand of cards. And if you do nothing else in life but focus on playing these patterns well, then you're going to have an amazing life. You're going to have a
mm,
fulfilling, satisfying life that you came here to experience. You're going to be in tune, you're going to be in alignment. And then this is the part that actually surprised me the most about these cards. When I first started doing readings for people, I didn't expect this to happen. But afterwards, it made perfect sense that it would happen. I'd be telling them how to play their cards right. And then they call me the next day, be like, I got a job offer today, or I
wow.
just met someone, or this happened and then that lined up. And then I was like, wait a minute, this, like, that makes sense. Like, if these cards are what I think they are, which is showing you the fundamental building blocks of reality, and you have free
Mm,
will, so you can choose to do whatever you want. If you
yes.
consciously are aligning your decision making with these building blocks of reality, then yeah, everything is going to synchronistically fall perfectly into place for you. Everything's going to line up because now you're in conscious harmony with this underlying reality that we can't see but is
Mm,
there. It's like, oh, that makes perfect sense, that really what we want to do and what we want to focus on is playing our cards right. That is the
mm,
fundamental injunction or fundamental blessing or fundamental thing to say, as a, like, the best advice you could give to your younger self is focus on playing your cards right. That's what you do.
And that is boiled down to the affirmation to play it
Yeah,
well. Where for me it says, I trust my intuitive genius and I patiently, confidently speak what I know is true. So if I'm
yeah,
following that frequency, then I'm playing my cards
that's right.
right. Okay. I love that.
And
I
thank you for
love that.
drawing that connection, because I didn't actually draw that connection myself until you said it out loud. That's right. That affirmation to play it well is
Yeah.
how you play your seven of clubs well. Yeah.
This is so akin to, what I share with people when I'm doing readings, and because a lot of times people come to me and they're nervous,
Mm,
and I'm like, "You're nervous? Tell me about that." Well, you're gonna say something bad, and it's like, yeah, you're
mm.
fucked. Your life is fucked. It's like you got dealt a bad hand. Like I was like, I don't. No, that's not how it
Mm,
works. Like you are a
mm,
gift. And the next time the planets and stars will be aligned in the way that they were aligned when you were born is over 25,000
mm.
years from the date, time, and place of your birth.
Oh,
So
wow.
you are a divine, unique miracle. And within each astrological code, just like when you flip that card one way or the other way, there's gifts and there's challenges. The challenges are there to inspire you to open your gifts, and the gifts are there to help you work on your challenges. So it's like you have and you kind of get into this in your book where it's like these are the cards you've been dealt. It's like how you play your
Hmm.
hand. There's no bad hands. It's
Yeah.
how you're playing your
Yeah.
hand. And I use the metaphor as like you're driving a car. You have a Rolls Royce or a Honda, whatever it is. Like this is your car, and it's how you drive it. You can drive it into a
Yeah.
building, you can drive it off the
That's right.
road, or you can keep it on the straight and narrow, and and go wherever you want to go. Where are you taking it? How are you driving it? It's how you're working with the energy.
100%. That's a great metaphor. And even better, and you probably tell people this too, not only is it all about how you drive your car, but you chose the car.
Yeah. Yes.
You chose this car. You
Yes.
wanted this car. And
Exactly.
I like how you
Yes.
call it astrological codes. I'd never heard that
Mm.
expression before. It's a
Yeah, I
code.
hadn't either.
You just made it up today? No.
No, no, but I'm the only person that I know that's
Oh,
said
okay. I've
that. So
never heard
that's
it
why I've
before.
always,
I like it. It's your
yeah.
astrological code.
Hmm.
I like that.
Because I mean, don't you think we're in some kind of simulation here, or it's
So
right,
that's going to
where
be the
this is,
next thing to
yeah,
go to answer your question about play your cards right, is that,
mm,
yeah, we live in a game construct.
exactly,
And so
yes,
I say this on my website after all my spiritual searching everywhere, is to realize that we're playing a game. And so the
mhm,
best thing to realize is to live our lives like it's our favorite game to play.
yes,
This is it. This is the game
that's
we
it,
chose. But I need to remind myself of that often, that, I got to remember, okay, I chose this. Oh, fuck. Why did I choose this? But no, okay. No, I wanted this. This is my game. And it's challenging. It's challenging.
mm,
It holds my interest. Like I wanted to climb Mount Everest and I'm running out of oxygen at the top and I got 100 meters to go. But I wanted that challenge. My soul wanted this
mm,
challenge, this test. And it's a challenging game that we're here to play inside of this elegantly precise mathematical construct.
absolutely, yeah. Wow, Alexander, it has been such an honor and a privilege to connect with you and to receive your wisdom. Uh, Thank you so much for sharing that with me, with the audience here. I would love to continue the conversation. I feel like we could talk for
A
another
long time.
couple
You and I
hours,
could talk for a
and
long time.
yes, and get even deeper into like who we are,
Yeah.
why we're here, what is this place. And I feel like the cards, the astrology, numerology, all of it gives insight
Yeah.
into answering those questions.
It does, and all the religions, the way that we reference some of that languaging. There's no coincidence in the languaging that religion has utilized. So much of this esoteric knowledge was actually deliberately hidden in those narratives.
Yes.
And so a lot of these
Yes.
religious archetypal patterns, stories, are this encoded esoteric information.
Yes. Exactly. You got into that in your book, which I loved, and it makes so much sense that, I mean, the cards, the astrology, they predate the
Yeah,
religions,
yeah,
and so of course they wanted to hide this
yeah.
knowledge
It was a
because
threat to them.
it exactly, it
Yeah,
empowers people without their
yeah.
control. And so,
And it's
yeah.
funny to maybe, and this may be the last thing I'll say, unless you want to ask me more
Mhm.
afterwards. But it tickles me. I really enjoy the fact that I wanted to be a Roman Catholic priest at one point, and now I'm practicing witchcraft according to the church.
Well, amen to that. Amen to that, Alexander. Such an honor to have you here. Thank you
Thanks,
again.
Scott. It's been a real pleasure for me. So thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening to the Weekly Transit, interviews and conversations from an astrological lens. This episode was produced by me, Scott Tajarian. Music written by Ben Leinbach from Listen Deep by Amber Herzog Lyman. If you're interested in being a guest on the Weekly Transit, you can email me at scott@theweeklytransit.com. Wishing you all the best as you ride the planetary waves.